As usual, we're going to start in the south of the Gaza Strip. As Nora said in her excellent and devastating newscast, the targeting of schools is something that is happening consciously by the Israelis. The Israeli military is also reporting on targeting these schools. They're not covering it up. They've reported on more than 75 airstrikes in the last 2 months on schools. And so the military is claiming these and saying that they're Hamas command posts and whatever, but they're openly putting on record that they're targeting these civilian, the only place in Gaza for civilians to go. And as Nora said, people are pressed into 11% of the Gaza Strip, which is the number that the civil defense used a few days ago and the Israeli military used today, which is interesting that the Israeli military is using civil defense numbers for things like that. But when the casualties come, they cast aspersions on the casualty rates that we know are on undercount. So we're going to go from the south of the Gaza Strip to the north and the Netzarim corridor, which you can see here on this map of all of Gaza. And when we zoom in here on Rafah, we can see where the main battle space has been. And this is now 106 days into the Rafah invasion that was supposed to be a few weeks. The American administration is still not saying it's a full-scale invasion of Rafah, but the destruction along the Philadelphia corridor is what is important to note. And the Philadelphia corridor has, of course, come up significantly in the ceasefire negotiations, the fraudulent ceasefire negotiations, because Israel is now formally, through maps to their delegations, delivering maps to the delegation, their delegation delivering maps showing them remaining in the Philadelphia corridor. And the Philadelphia corridor didn't come out of nowhere. This is not something that popped up during this war. The Philadelphia corridor goes back to 1982. It goes back to the Israelis leaving the Sinai Peninsula and their peace agreement with Egypt and cutting Rafah, Egypt, and Rafah, Gaza in half. And splitting the territory. So this is something that goes back. This is a strategic corridor that Israel believes is necessary for cutting up the Gaza Strip. So the fact that it's in the news now and seems like it's something new, it's important to always note that this is not the case. There's a long history of battles in this area along the Philadelphia corridor, notably in 2001, the first tunnel operation dug underneath an IDF position on the Philadelphia corridor with 500 pounds of explosives using a tunnel to devastating effect in 2001. And then in 2004, when I was reporting from Rafah, there was a series of operations along the corridor that were tunnel dug under IDF positions along the corridor that essentially were part of the critical mass of operations of resistance that drove the Israelis out of Gaza. And Ariel Sharon at the time said, we had a dream, the dream to colonize Gaza, but the dream could not be implemented. And the dream could not be implemented because of the resistance in Gaza, because of the tunneling in Gaza. And that is what the Israelis have encountered since their May invasion of Rafah, is that there's tunnels all underneath the border. And the Israelis have said originally that it was going to be a weeks-long operation. And now the IDF talks about years to stay in this corridor. So that's their fantasy right now, is to stay in the Philadelphia corridor. So just wanted to bring attention to that because it's in the news now. But of course, listeners of this show, we've been tracking the Philadelphia corridor since the beginning of the Rafah invasion, and even before, knowing that it would be a strategic corridor that Israel is trying to fight along. So if we look and see Tel Sultan there in the west side, that's where the core of these operations are happening this week. And again, everything you're seeing this week is from the days since you saw me last. So yeah, let's go to number one, Tamara. This is an operation by the Qassam brigades against an Israeli position in a hospital. Also, we know that they bomb schools, bomb hospitals, and occupy the hospitals as well. This is an operation against the Indonesian hospital. You can see the thermobaric Iranian RPG-7 thermobaric warhead, and that's the North Korean F-7 fragmentation warhead that you're seeing there. Seeing fighters mouse holing again. These sophisticated types of operations, moving around between buildings without going outside. All these things we've seen since the beginning of the battle. You can see through those two sniper loopholes there, you can see the soldiers in a window. This is their loophole version, clearly marking their position. Again, the only curtain in the entire building, bombed out, destroyed Indonesian hospital. You can see it there. It's been rendered inoperative for many months. So this operation is, again, it's a Qassam Brigade's operation. You can see the way that the thermobaric warhead just punches through that wall. And on the backside of the building, you can see the F-7. It was a combined strike, and we have the filming from a third position. So again, spotters all over these operations in multiple places. That's something you're going to see. And again, this operation was dedicated to 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿 as all of the operations, many of the operations, almost all of the operations recently have been by all the factions. And there's the medevac again, untouched medevac. You can see here at the end of this video that they're going to bring in fruit here in triangles, which is, again, the fighters in the battalions across Gaza communicating with each other, because we've seen that that started with the Tel Hawa battalion when they got from the runner that picked up their video, when they got those desserts in triangles. And now all the other battalions are communicating with each other by doing the same thing. So interesting to note that, again, constant communication. There's nothing like people being trapped without communication. These fighters are publishing these videos on the same day in many cases that they're being executed, and they're able to communicate with each other. Command and control is still intact in all of the important ways. Of course, the war is devastating. It's devastating for everybody. It's costly on the resistance. It's costly on the Israelis. But there's nothing like dismantling the 4 battalions in Rafah that's going on here. In fact, the Israelis have limited their operations in the town of Rafah down mostly to the corridor, which is why we see this fighting in Tel Sultan, which is a built-up area along the corridor. And the fighters say at the end here, the one fighter says that that one of the fighters brought us a basket of fruits as a treat so that they may rejoice in the victory of this operation. And the sign says that you're going to see coming up, the sign says to, it shouts out the other, the Tel Hawa battalion that used the triangles, the Khan Younis battalion that did it as well. And then there was the pizza in the Tel Sultan in the western edge, and these fighters praying after their operation. And on the sign says Rafah Brigade, Western Battalion, Tel Sultan. So the fighters, again, want to identify where they're from, marking the battle space, giving us in these videos the kind of reporting that we would just never get otherwise. And their media operations has been a critical part of this media strategy throughout the war to show the world that Israel's losing. Like Dr. Morandi said, the fighters themselves broadcasting these images have played a key role in that. So that is continuing apace this week. If we look at number 2, this is a 𝐓𝐿 𝐄𝐿 operation, RPG-7 operation. We see a D9 armored bulldozer, Namr troop carrier, and Merkava tank operating together. Again, this is in Tel Sultan, the main battle space. Those close quarters battles, 15 Yasin strikes just in the last week in this area. The fighters identifying here in the volume that we cut out that hit the tank, and the fighters are going to move to a second location here. And the one fighter says to the other, he says, "We destroyed it." And the other fighter says, "Let's do another. We succeeded in the first. We'll probably succeed in the second too. God is generous." They're just laughing at each other. And part of this operation, the joy of their resistance, and they're fighting back, obviously. a key part of this genocide is the resistance that has been carried out by the fighters, but also by the people themselves that Nora covers every week in her newscast. Just the resistance of all elements, from the children are in many ways the most fierce resistors are the children. And in this operation here, you can hear when they're moving between the buildings, you can hear machine gun fire from the tank-mounted machine gun. So we're not looking at pot shots that are being taken here. This is right in the core of the battle space that's happening, an operation again. And this operation was dedicated by 𝐓𝐴 𝐄𝐿 𝐄𝐿. You can see the towing, D9 bulldozer here towing the Namr troop carrier. So it's a mobility kill, somewhat surprising with the RPG-7. It's not a tandem charge round that 𝐓𝐴 was firing there, but it immobilized the tank. Mobility kill is something that is also a very strategic, it's a tactical victory with strategic implications, because the damaging of the tanks, they take time to fix. They're out of battle. It stretches Israel's resources further. And so we're seeing that consistently throughout these battles. We're wondering, it's fair to wonder how they're going to fight a war in Lebanon that they're promising when they're, again, as Dr. Morandi said, unable to handle this small area in the Gaza Strip where people have been trapped for decades without access to the outside world. If we look at number 5 here tomorrow, we'll go to Khan Younis. This is just I brought this one because it's ingenuity here. This is a different type of operation than we've seen. This is 𝐓𝐴 𝐄𝐿. They're calling this an Ababil. What it is just a rocket-assisted guerrilla action device. The device we've seen the fighters place by hand under the turrets of tanks. Here, where in Khan Younis, where there's a command post here, and the Israelis are staying mostly on the edges, and they're unable to reach the resistances. Isn't able to reach them with their close quarters weaponry. They're here mounting up an improvised rocket-assisted munition and firing it at the Israeli position. Again, these are fragmentation weapons that explode. They're for an area. They cover an area. So they don't need to be as accurate, but you can see they use the same principles as the mortar and rocket teams. You can see the measuring and putting into the ground, into these makeshift launchers at the proper coordinates to fire. And then they fire simultaneously, which is also an asset. And also, just to note, in this video, we're seeing it from 3 different angles. Again, spotters all over Able. We're showing here in the upper corner, it says camera 1. You're going to see camera 2 and camera 3. And those cameras aren't just for filming the operation. Those spotters are positioned around the city. That's part of the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance that's happening constantly, and the reason why the resistance always has the upper hand on these Israeli movements, because they have these spotters in these positions. So they're not deploying these spotters just to take video of their operation. These spotters are in place and taking the video as part of that. So let's look at number 6, because another ingenuity, we see a makeshift suicide drone here, an armed explosive-laden drone. You can see it's a styrofoam, and it works. And they launched this drone in Khan Younis along with a first-person view camera, an analog camera that you're going to see here. This is the first of its kind that we've seen in Gaza with a camera like this on a makeshift drone that could be deployed by an engineer in Gaza who has the time. The war has lasted long enough to be carrying out operations like this, where the engineers have time to operate with the little resources that they have right now in certain circumstances, and do it successfully. And we can watch this armed drone. They're putting the fuse in it, and the fighter says that this drone attack will bring inevitable death. It targeted the house of the enemy soldiers that are fortified. So the Israeli military taking up positions inside houses, which is something they do constantly. And you can see the FPV, the first-person view of this drone. Just remarkable ingenuity in the most difficult circumstances, pretty much that humans can imagine, is going on right now in Gaza. And the resistance still carrying out operations like this. So I just wanted to bring you those two just to show you how they're able to do that in the middle of the battle. And let's look at number 7, Tamar, because this is actually from the beginning of the war. This is the 𝐓𝐿 drones. Mohammed 𝐓𝐿 was the founder of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 drone program. He was assassinated in Tunisia in 2016. And this is from October 7th. These videos were released. I haven't showed you guys these videos yet. The drones always get bumped by having so much material to cover each week. So we haven't shown these, but these drones, these 𝐓𝐿 drones, suicide drones, one-way attack drones, armed drones, were a key part of the October 7th operation. They were part of the blinding operation, the cover fire for the blinding operation that dropped the communications for the Gaza division. And you can see this drone program has been in place for many years, but we had never seen it on this scale before. During the 2014 war, the first drone was sent during the 2014 war, and Israel shot it down with a Patriot missile, which is $1 billion plus battery and a multi-million-dollar missile. Shooting down a drone in 2014. The drone program accelerated between 2014 and now, and on October 7th, there was more than 36 of these fired simultaneously during that operation on October 7th. So just wanted to show those drones. They haven't made it in there, the 𝐓𝐿 drones. Again, ingenuity inside Gaza, under siege, building these weapons themselves from scratch. Has been happening with everything from hand grenades now all the way through to an Air Force. And we saw in that video that we just watched, the Qassam fighter had an Air Force patch on his sleeve there, showing that they have an air wing division as well. So major developments that are happening under the most brutal circumstances. If we look at